I funded a $30,000 Dubai vacation to bond with my family, booking first-class seats and five-star hotels myself. Then my father texted me saying I was out because my brother's fiancée needed my spot. They forgot that I track corporate fraud for a living. I do not need to scream or make a scene to get even. I just need to place one single receipt in the right hands. My name is Stella Stewart. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in my apartment. It was 7:18 in the evening on a Tuesday. The air conditioner hummed a low, mechanical drone that usually helped me focus. But tonight it sounded like a warning siren in the distance. I was looking at a PDF file. It was the finalized itinerary for the Stewart family Dubai Jubilee. It was a document I had built myself, hour by hour, dollar by dollar. I scrolled down to the passenger manifest. My eyes scanned the list, expecting the familiar rhythm of names. Gordon Stewart, Seat 2A. Marilyn Stewart, Seat 2B. Evan Stewart, Seat 3A. My eyes moved to Seat 3B. That was my seat. I had selected it specifically because it was on the left side of the aisle, away from the galley noise, perfect for the 14-hour flight. I had paid for that seat with a wire transfer that drained my bonus check from last quarter. Seat 3B? Tessa Miller. I blinked. I refreshed the browser, thinking it was a cache error. The page reloaded. The name remained, Tessa Miller, my brother's fiancée. I sat back in my chair. The ergonomic mesh dug into my spine. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. In my line of work, panic is a liability. I work in forensic compliance and risk management for Northbridge Risk Group. When I see an anomaly in a ledger, I do not scream. I investigate. I look for the pattern. But this was not a corporate ledger. This was my life. My phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. It was a single notification. I looked down. Sender Dad. Stay home. Tessa is going instead. You understand. I stared at the text. It was not a question. It was not a request. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the casual brevity of someone canceling a lunch appointment, not a $30,000 international vacation. You understand. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was a command disguised as an assumption. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. It rang once, twice, sent to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail immediately. He had declined the call. A second vibration. This time from Mom. Do not make a scene. People are watching. I looked around my empty apartment. The only thing watching me was the standby light on my television, but I knew what she meant. She meant the neighbors. She meant the extended family group chat. She meant the invisible audience of social status that my parents performed for every single day of their lives. I stood up. I needed to move. I walked to the window and looked out at the Charlotte skyline. The city lights were blurred by the condensation on the glass. I closed my eyes and the memory hit me. It was 4 months ago. We were on the patio at my parents' house. Dad had poured me a glass of expensive scotch, the kind he usually saved for his business partners. He had looked at me with a warmth that felt like sunlight after a long winter. You are so capable. Stella, he had said, I am so proud of the woman you have become. This family needs a win. We need a memory that is pure, no strings, just us. But cash is tight with the business expansion. Can you handle the logistics? It would be an investment in us. An investment. That was the word he used. I had transferred $30,000 the next week. I used my savings. I used the points I had aggressively accumulated over 5 years of corporate travel. I booked the Burj Al Arab. I booked the private desert safari. I booked the underwater dining experience. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted, for once, to be the daughter who provided the joy. Not just the daughter who fixed the problems. And now, Seat 3B belonged to Tessa. I grabbed my keys. I did not reply to the texts. This was not a conversation to be had over digital signals. This required presence. The drive to my parents' house took 20 minutes. I drove in silence. No radio, no podcasts. Just the sound of the tires on the asphalt. My mind was already cataloging the variables. How could they change the name? The ticket was non-transferable without significant fees and identity verification. The hotel reservations were under my name. The credit card on file was mine. I pulled into the driveway. The house was lit up like a lantern. It was a sprawling colonial revival that shouted upper-middle-class stability. My father's BMW was in the driveway. Next to it was Evan's sedan, and tucked behind them was Tessa's bright red convertible. They were all there. I walked to the front door. I still had my key, a heavy brass piece that felt cold in my palm. I did not knock. I unlocked the door and stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me first. Roast beef and rosemary. It was the smell of Sunday dinners, of orchestrated family harmony. I heard laughter drifting from the dining room. It was the sound of glass clinking against glass. I walked down the hallway. The floorboards creaked under my boots, but no one heard. They were too busy celebrating. I stopped at the archway leading to the dining room. The scene before me was composed like a Renaissance painting. The chandelier was dimmed to a warm glow. The good china was out. The crystal wine glasses caught the light. Dad was at the head of the table. Mom was to his right. Evan was on the left. And there, in the seat opposite Dad, the seat that was traditionally reserved for the guest of honor, the seat that I usually occupied during these high-stakes family summits, sat Tessa. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that looked suspiciously similar to one I had worn last Christmas. Her hair was swept up in a loose chignon. She was leaning forward, laughing at something Dad had just said. Her hand rested on the table, and on her finger. The engagement ring sparkled. I watched them for 10 seconds. 10 seconds of observation. I noted the open bottle of wine, a vintage Cabernet, $80 a bottle. I noted the way Mom was watching Tessa with a look of desperate approval. I noted Evan's posture, slumped and passive, his eyes fixed on his plate. Then Dad saw me. He did not flinch. He did not look guilty. He stopped laughing, set his glass down, and smiled. It was a tight, practiced smile. "Stella," he said. His voice was booming, filling the room. "We were just wondering when you would get the message." The room went silent. Tessa turned to look at me. Her expression was a masterpiece of manufactured innocence. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted. "Stella," Tessa said. Her voice was soft, melodic. "I am so glad you came. We wanted to tell you together." I stepped fully into the room. I did not take off my coat. I felt like an intruder in a house I had helped pay for. "Tell me what I asked." My voice was level, no tremor. "That you stole my seat," Mom gasped. She placed a hand over her chest. "Stella, please. Your tone, it is very aggressive." "Aggressive?" I looked at Mom, then at Dad. "I just checked the itinerary. My name is gone. $30,000 of my money is currently funding a trip that I am no longer on. I think aggressive is a mild reaction." Dad sighed. He picked up his napkin and dabbed the corners of his mouth. He looked at me with disappointment, as if I had failed a test I didn't know I was taking. "It is not about the money." "Stella," Dad said, "why do you always make it about money? This is about family. I am family." I said, "Yes, you are." Dad replied smoothly, "But Tessa is becoming family. And she has never been to Dubai. Evan tells me she has been stressed with the wedding planning. They need this. We need this time to bond with her." "So you kick me off?" I asked. "You could have asked me to book another ticket. You could have discussed this. There were no more first-class seats on that flight." Tessa interjected. She looked at me with a pitying expression that made my stomach turn. Gordon checked. "We wanted to all be together. It would be awkward if you were back in economy while we were all up front. So the solution was to leave me in North Carolina." Dad stood up. He picked up his wine glass. He looked around the table, commanding the room. "Stella, look at the big picture," he said. "You have been to Europe. You travel for work. You have seen the world. Tessa is just starting out. You are the oldest. You are the capable one, the strong one." He paused for effect. "You are the one who understands sacrifice." He continued. "That is your role in this family. You make things work. When I saw the opportunity to give Evan and Tessa this start, I knew you would step aside. It is what you do. You fix things." He raised his glass higher. "To the family," he announced, "and to our new daughter, Dubai will be her true debut." Evan mumbled cheers and drank quickly. Mom beamed at Tessa. Tessa clinked her glass against Dad's. I stood there, frozen. The words washed over me. Your role. You fix things. They had weaponized my competence, because I had always handled my own life, because I had never asked them for bail money or emotional rescue. They decided I did not need anything at all. They decided I was a resource, not a person. I looked at Evan. And you, I asked, you are okay with this? Evan looked up. His eyes were watery. He looked terrified. He glanced at Tessa, then at Dad. It is just a trip. Stella, Evan muttered. Tessa really wanted to go. She said you would be cool with it, Tessa said. I repeated. I looked at the woman sitting in my chair. She wasn't just sitting there. She was posing. She had integrated herself into the negative space I had left behind. She offered me a small, tight smile. It wasn't an apology. It was a challenge. I just want to be close to your parents, Tessa said. I knew you would understand. You are so busy with work anyway. I bet you actually feel relieved not to have to take the time off. She was rewriting my reality in real time. I took a step toward the table. My eyes landed on a stack of papers near Dad's elbow, a white envelope. It was thick. On the front, written in Dad's expansive, looping handwriting, were the words, "Travel confirmations." I didn't wait for an answer. I reached out and took the envelope. Stella. Do not be rude, Mom hissed. Put that down. Dad's hand twitched. But he didn't stop me. He was too arrogant to think I would find anything he hadn't prepared for me to see. I opened the flap. I pulled out the papers. There were the flight confirmations, the hotel vouchers, the excursion bookings, all the things I had researched, all the things I had paid for. And then, at the back of the stack, I saw it. It was a credit card authorization form for the travel agency. The form required to change a passenger name on a non-refundable, high-value ticket. It required the signature of the cardholder. I looked at the signature line. It was my name, Stella J. Stewart, but the ink didn't shine under the chandelier light. It wasn't the wet, indented stroke of a ballpoint pen. It was flat, grainy. It was a photocopy. I looked closer. I recognized the specific loop of the S. I recognized the way the T crossed. It was identical to the signature I had used on a birthday card I gave Dad last year. A card I knew he kept in his office drawer. They hadn't just bullied me out of the trip. They hadn't just emotionally manipulated me. Someone had physically cut my signature from an old document, pasted it onto this authorization form, and photocopied it to make it look like a single, legitimate document. I looked up. The room was quiet. The air conditioning kicked on, blowing a cold draft across the table. Dad was watching me. He didn't look worried. He looked annoyed that I was reading the fine print. It is just paperwork. Stella, he said dismissively. We handled it so you would not be bothered with the admin. You are welcome. I placed the paper back on the table. I smoothed it out with my hand. My fingers brushed against the cold, flat surface of the forgery. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. The part of my brain that audits billion-dollar companies for fraud simply clicked on. It was a quiet, mechanical sound, a switch flipping in the dark. I looked at Tessa, who was sipping her wine. I looked at Evan, who was staring at his peas. I looked at Mom and Dad, the architects of this little heist. You are right, I said softly. I understand perfectly. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the front door into the cold night air. I got into my car. I didn't cry. I didn't slam the steering wheel. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I opened my calendar. I created a new event for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I titled it Dubai 30K Audit. Then I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, casting a blue glow on my face. If they wanted to play games with paperwork, they had chosen the wrong opponent. They thought they had simply rearranged a seating chart. They had no idea they had just initiated an investigation. The drive back to my apartment in uptown Charlotte was a blur of interstate lights and red taillights. I did not turn on the radio. I needed the silence to process the anatomy of the betrayal I had just witnessed. When I finally walked through my front door, I locked it behind me. The heavy deadbolt sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I had heard all evening. It was the sound of boundaries. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady. That was the thing about me. I did not break down in crises. I was built for them. My name is Stella Stewart. I am 33 years old. I am a white woman living in the banking capital of the South, and I have spent my entire adult life making sure that things do not fall apart. By day, I work for Northbridge Risk Group. My official title is Senior Forensic Compliance Officer. It sounds dry, but in reality, I am a professional lie detector. I sift through corporate ledgers, expense reports, and procurement logs, looking for the red flags that signal fraud. I look for the ghost employees on payroll. I look for the vendors that do not exist. I look for the moment when a mistake turns into a crime. I am very good at my job because I have been practicing for it my entire life. I just never realized until tonight that my family was my first unassigned case file. I sat down on my beige sofa, the one I bought with my first significant promotion, and looked at the blank television screen. I needed to understand the players in this game before I could dismantle their strategy. My father, Gordon Stewart, is a man who believes that perception is reality. To Gordon, the Stewart family is not just a group of people sharing DNA. We are a brand. We are a franchise. He is obsessed with the aesthetic of success. He drives a leased BMW he can barely afford. He wears suits that cost more than his mortgage payments. He speaks in platitudes about legacy and honor. But his moral compass points strictly toward whatever makes him look best in the eyes of the country club membership committee. He loves the idea of being a patriarch, but he hates the labor of it. My mother, Marilyn, is his press secretary. She is a woman who values peace above truth. If the house is burning down, Marilyn's priority is to make sure the neighbors do not smell the smoke. She taught me from a young age that a woman's job is to smooth the edges, to absorb the shocks, to be the shock absorber so the men in the house can drive over potholes without spilling their coffee. Then there is Evan, my younger brother. He is 30 years old, but in the family narrative, he is perpetually 12. Evan is the golden boy, the heir apparent who never quite learned how to tie his own shoes, because someone was always kneeling down to do it for him. He is not malicious. He is just tragically, weaponizedly incompetent. He flows like water down the path of least resistance, and lately, that path has been dug by Tessa Miller. I took a sip of water and let the cold liquid cool my throat. Tessa was the new variable. She was 27, beautiful in a curated, Instagram-ready way, and she possessed a terrifying kind of intelligence. It was not book smarts. It was social predation. She knew exactly how to play the part of the deferential, wide-eyed daughter-in-law. She knew that my parents were desperate for adoration, and she fed it to them in heaping spoonfuls. She was polite. She was charming. She was calculating. Tonight, at that dinner table, I had seen her true face. When she looked at me, it was not with embarrassment. It was with a soft, pitying triumph. It was the look of a woman who had identified the weak link in the herd and successfully culled it. She had realized that in the Stewart family economy, I was the worker bee, and she was the queen. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back. How did I get here? How did I become the person who funds a $30,000 vacation only to be disinvited from it? It was not a sudden accident. It was a lifetime of conditioning. For as long as I can remember, I have been the capable one. I was the one who remembered birthdays. I was the one who proofread Evan's college essays. I was the one who figured out the complicated remote controls. I was the one who stayed late to help clean up after Christmas dinner while Evan played video games and Dad had a brandy. I became the fixer. And the dangerous thing about being the fixer is that people stop seeing you as a person with needs. They see you as a utility. You are like the electricity or the Wi-Fi. They only notice you when you stop working. This Dubai trip was supposed to be different. I remembered the afternoon Dad pitched the idea to me. It was 4 months ago. The sun was shining. He had put his hand on my shoulder, a heavy paternal weight. "Stella," he had said, "we are getting older. Evan is getting married. Everything is changing. I want one last great adventure, a Stewart family legacy trip, but the business capital is tied up in the new expansion." He had looked at me with those pleading eyes, the ones that made me feel important. "You are doing so well at Northbridge," he continued. "You are the success story. If you could handle the logistics, if you could make this happen, it would be an investment in the family. It would be something we talk about for 20 years. An investment." I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. I logged into my banking portal. I needed to see the numbers to ground myself. I had not just written a check for $30,000. I was not a trust fund kid. I worked 60-hour weeks. I spent my life in airports and hotel conference rooms. To pay for this trip, I had liquidated my entire annual performance bonus. I had cashed in 400,000 credit card reward points that I had been hoarding for a solo trip to Japan. I had spent weeks hunting for the best exchange rates. I clicked on the transaction history. Emirates Airlines, $12,400. Burj Al Arab Jumeirah, $8,200. Desert Safari Private Tour, $2,500. The list went on. I realized now where I had made the mistake. I thought I was buying a gift. I thought I was buying an experience for the people I loved. But my family did not see it as a gift. They saw it as a tribute. In their minds, the moment the money left my account, it ceased to be mine. It became family money. And since Dad was the head of the family, he had the executive right to allocate those resources however he saw fit. By paying for the trip, I had not purchased a seat at the table. I had simply catered the event. They assumed I would take it. They assumed I would swallow the indignity because that is what Stella does. Stella handles it. Stella is tough. Stella does not need the luxury trip because Stella can afford to go on her own some other time. They told themselves a story where I was actually relieved to be left behind, so they could enjoy their theft without guilt. It was gaslighting on an industrial scale. I stared at the screen. The anger that had been simmering in my gut began to cool into something harder, something sharper. It felt like steel hardening. I was done being the fixer. I was done being the utility. I thought about the celebration package I had seen on the hotel itinerary earlier. A bottle of Dom Perignon, rose petals in the suite, a private butler service. I had added that for Mom and Dad's anniversary. Now, it was going to be consumed by Evan and Tessa. I thought about the look on Evan's face when I asked him if he was okay with this. The cowardice in his eyes. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was theft. But he was too afraid of losing Tessa. Too afraid of upsetting Dad. To say a word. He was willing to sacrifice his sister to keep his comfort. And Dad, the man who taught me to shake hands firmly and look people in the eye, he had forged my signature. He had literally cut and pasted my identity to steal from me. He did not just take my money, he took my name. That was the line. If they had just asked me for the money, I might have given it to them. If they had said, "Stella, we are short on cash. Can you help Evan and Tessa go on a honeymoon?" I would have probably written a check, because I loved them. But they did not ask. They erased me. They treated me like a glitch in the system that needed to be patched out. So the new version of the software, the Stewart Family 2.0 featuring Tessa, could run smoothly. I stood up and walked to the wall safe in my closet. I spun the dial, right to 24, left to 10, right to 33. The heavy door swung open. Inside, I kept my most important documents, my passport, my birth certificate, my car title, and my archival financial records. I pulled out a stack of bank statements from the last 5 years. I pulled out the files I kept on family expenses. I carried the stack to my desk. I was not going to cry. Crying was for people who had no recourse. Crying was for victims. I was not a victim. I was a compliance officer. And I had just discovered a massive internal control failure in the organization known as the Stewart family. My parents and my brother thought they knew me. They thought they knew Stella, the daughter, the one who sought approval, the one who wanted to be praised. They did not know Stella, the professional, They did not know the Stella who could track a shell company through 3 different tax havens. They did not know the Stella who could deconstruct a money laundering scheme by analyzing the timestamp on a coffee shop receipt. They did not know that I had a mind that categorized vengeance not as an emotional outburst, but as a necessary audit correction. I looked at the clock. It was 9:45 in the evening. I opened a new spreadsheet. I began to type. Objective full financial audit of all transactions involving Gordon Stewart, Marilyn Stewart, and Evan Stewart, funded by Stella Stewart. Scope 5 years. Status open. I remembered Dad's voice at dinner. You are the one who understands sacrifice. He was right. I did understand sacrifice, but he had forgotten the other half of the equation. I also understood consequences. They wanted to treat this trip as a business transaction. Fine. I would treat it as a business transaction. They wanted to use paperwork to cut me out. I would use paperwork to bury them. I picked up my phone and looked at the family group chat. A new photo had been posted by Mom. It was a picture of the 4 of them, Dad, Mom, Evan, and Tessa raising a toast. The caption read, "So excited for our adventure. Family first." I did not reply. I did not leave the group. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder named Evidence. The switch had been flipped. The daughter was gone. The auditor was in the room. And the auditor had questions that required answers. I looked at the date on my computer. The flight to Dubai was scheduled to depart in exactly 5 days. That was 120 hours. In my line of work, 120 hours was an eternity. It was enough time to bring down a CEO. It was enough time to freeze assets. It was certainly enough time to ruin a vacation. I cracked my knuckles. The sound was sharp in the quiet apartment. Let us begin. I whispered to the empty room. The morning after the dinner, I did not wake up to an apology. I woke up to a summons. My phone had been silent all night. A tactical silence that usually precedes a bombardment. At 8:30 in the morning, the message arrived from my mother. It was brief and carried the heavy, suffocating weight of her passive aggression. Please come by before work. We need to clear the air. Aunt Janice is here and asking about you. Aunt Janice, my father's older sister. The family historian and the unofficial judge of all Stewart family conduct, bringing her in was a strategic move. It meant they were circling the wagons. They were bringing in witnesses to shame me into compliance. I showered, dressed in my sharpest charcoal blazer armor for the corporate battlefield, appropriate for this skirmish, and drove back to the house. When I walked into the living room, the atmosphere was not one of reconciliation. It was a tribunal. Dad was sitting in his leather armchair, the one he reserved for lectures. Mom was perched nervously on the sofa, wringing her hands. Aunt Janice sat adjacent to her, looking like a statue of judgment carved from granite. And in the corner, sitting close together on the love seat, were Evan and Tessa. Tessa looked fresh, rested, and painfully demure. She was holding a mug of tea with both hands, looking up at me through her lashes as if she were a frightened deer and I was the hunter. Sit down, Stella, Dad said. He did not gesture to a chair. He simply issued the command. I remained standing. I have to get to the office. I said, I assumed you wanted to discuss the reimbursement. Dad let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked at Aunt Janice, shaking his head. You see, Dad said to her, this is what I am talking about. She walks in here, and the first word out of her mouth is about money. It is transactional. Everything with her is a ledger. He turned his gaze back to me. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth he used when he wanted something. You are being incredibly selfish. Stella, he said, I thought I raised you better. You funded this trip. Yes, but you did it for the wrong reasons. You did not do it to help the family. You did it to be recognized. You did it so you could sit at the head of the table and have us all thank you. And now that the plan has changed slightly to benefit your brother, you are throwing a tantrum because you are not the center of attention. The accusation hit me in the chest. It was a masterclass in deflection. He was taking my generosity and repainting it as narcissism. I paid $30,000, I said, keeping my voice steady. I planned the itinerary. I booked the hotels. You are not just changing the plan. You are taking my property and giving it to someone else without my permission. Do not ruin this wedding." Mom interjected. Her voice was high and thin. "Evan and Tessa are so stressed. The wedding is in 2 months. This trip is their chance to relax, to bond with us. If you pull the funding now, if you make a scene, you are casting a shadow over their marriage before it even begins. Do you want to be that person? The bitter sister who ruined everything." She was rewriting the narrative in real time. If I objected to being robbed, I was the villain. If I accepted the theft, I was the good daughter. I looked at Evan. He was staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. My watch buzzed on my wrist. I glanced down. A text message. From Evan. "Sis, I am sorry Tessa says you will understand. She says it is better this way." I looked up at him, then at Tessa. She was whispering something in his ear, her hand resting protectively on his knee. Tessa says, "My brother was not speaking. He was being ventriloquized. It is not about being bitter." I said to the room, "It is about respect, and it is about the fact that I am the one who paid." "And whose money is it?" "Really?" Dad asked. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You have done well. Stella, we are proud of you. But who supported you through college? Who gave you the down payment for your first car? We are a family. The money you put out is also for the family. It goes into the same pot. When you invest in us, you do not get to dictate the terms of how that investment is used." It was a breathtaking logic. The family pot. It was a concept that only existed when they needed my resources. When I needed help moving last year, the family pot was empty. When I needed a cosigner for my first apartment, the family pot was closed. But now, my $30,000 was apparently communal property. Actually, I said, legally, it is my money. It came from my bank account. The credit card is in my name. "Oh, stop it." Aunt Janice spoke for the first time. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping on pavement. "You are making a fuss over logistics. You are a single woman. Stella, you have your career. You have your freedom. Evan is building a family. The eldest daughter usually has to yield. It is the natural order. You step back so the new branch can grow. It is unbecoming to be so grasping." "Grasping," I repeated. "I am grasping for the vacation I bought." Tessa set her tea mug down on the coffee table. The ceramic made a sharp click. "Stella," she said softly. The room went quiet to hear her. "Please, I do not want to fight. I just never had a big family. I just wanted to be close to your mom and dad. I thought a trip like this, just the 4 of us, would help me really understand what it means to be a steward. I thought you would be happy that I want to love your parents this much." She looked at me with wide, wet eyes. It was a perfect performance. She had positioned herself as the daughter who wanted love, and me as the daughter who wanted control. "If you want to be close to them," I said, "you can pay for your own ticket." Dad stood up. The motion was abrupt. "Enough." He walked over to the sideboard and picked up a stack of papers. It was the itinerary folder again. He held it like a weapon. "There will be no refund," he said, "and there will be no more discussion. The changes have been made. The fees have been paid. Paid by whom I asked, because I saw a charge for a name change fee on my card alert this morning. $500. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "We used the card on file. It was easier. You will cover it. Consider it your wedding gift to them." I do not consent to that charge. I said, "I want the money back, or I want the trip transferred back to my name. Those are the options." Dad laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. "There are no options. Stella, you do not come into my house and make conditions. You are the child. I am the father. You will do what is best for this family, or you will not be part of it." He tossed the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. The papers fanned out, and there it was again. The credit card authorization form. I took a step closer. The morning sun was streaming through the window, hitting the paper at a sharp angle, in the daylight. The forgery was even more obvious. The signature line, where Stella J. Stewart was written, had a distinct, pixelated halo around the ink. It was a copy of a copy. But then I noticed something else. Underneath the authorization form was another document, a travel insurance waiver. And at the bottom of that page, there was another signature, my signature, but I had never signed a waiver. I always declined travel insurance because my premium credit card covered it automatically. I looked at Dad's hands. He was clenching and unclenching his fists. He wasn't just angry, he was defensive. He was guarding something. "You signed for me," I said. It wasn't a question. "You didn't just paste my signature. You are signing my name on legal documents. I acted as your proxy," Dad shouted. His face was turning a mottled red. "It is administrative. Stop acting like I'm a criminal. It is identity theft," I said. "It is family," he roared. "We own you." The words hung in the air. "We own you." He didn't mean to say it. The mask had slipped. He didn't see me as an autonomous human being. He saw me as an asset class. I was a bond that yielded dividends, and he was angry that the bond was trying to speak. I looked around the room. Mom was studying her fingernails. Aunt Janice was glaring at me with disdain. Evan was shrinking into the sofa cushions, letting Tessa stroke his arm. They were all complicit. They had all agreed, silently or explicitly, that my role was to be harvested. This was the test. They were pushing me to see if I would break. They wanted to see if my desire for their love was stronger than my self-respect. They were betting $30,000 that I would fold. I looked at Dad one last time. I looked at the folder with the forged signatures. "You are right," I said. My voice was eerily calm. "I have been looking at this the wrong way." Dad's shoulders relaxed slightly. He thought he had won. He thought I was conceding. "I am glad you are finally showing some maturity," he said, smoothing his tie. "I am going to work now," I said. "Enjoy the trip preparation." I turned and walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently, with the precision of a vault sealing shut. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I drove straight to my apartment. I did not go to the office. I called my assistant and told her I was taking a personal day. When I got home, I walked into my bedroom and knelt before the floor safe. I keyed in the combination. The mechanical tumble of the lock was the only sound in the apartment. I pulled out the heavy file box marked Financials. I took out every bank statement, every credit card agreement, every transfer receipt from the last 5 years. I carried them to the dining table. I opened my laptop. I did not just open a blank sheet this time. I opened the file I had named the night before Dubai 30K audit. I began to type, my fingers flying across the keys. Entry 1, unauthorized use of credit card, ending in 4092, amount $500, Merchant Emirates Airlines, authorization method forged signature via photocopy. Witnesses Gordon Stewart, Marilyn Stewart, Evan Stewart, Tessa Miller, Janice Stewart. I looked at the stack of papers. I thought about Dad's words, "We own you." I reached for the scanner. I fed the first bank statement into the machine. The whirring sound of the scanner was the sound of a counterattack. "Let us see who owns whom," I whispered. They thought they had given me a test. They thought the question was, will she submit? They were wrong. The question was, how much evidence can she gather before the plane takes off? And I had 4 days left. The difference between a hunch and a conviction is documentation. In my line of work, we have a saying, if it is not written down, it did not happen. Conversely, if it is written down, it leaves a trail that can never be fully erased. My family had written everything down. They just assumed I would never bother to read the metadata. I sat at my dining table, which had now been converted into a command center. My laptop was open to 3 different browser windows. My phone was on speaker. I had a notepad to my right and a pen in my hand. It was 10:15 in the morning. I dialed the number for the concierge service of the high-end travel agency I had used to book the trip. I had selected them specifically for their discretion and attention to detail. I hoped those qualities would now work in my favor. The phone rang twice before a human voice answered. "Prestige Travel. This is David speaking. How may I assist you today?" Ms. Stewart David. Good. I remembered David. He was efficient. Hello, David, I said. My voice was the vocal equivalent of a starched white shirt, crisp, professional, and devoid of emotion. I am reviewing the finalized itinerary for the Dubai booking. Reference number 4. 7, 2, Bravo, 9. One moment, please, David said. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Ah, yes, the Stewart family jubilee. I see the changes were finalized yesterday. Is there an issue with the new seating arrangements? I am just clarifying the billing for my records. I said, I noticed a significant charge on my statement this morning. Can you confirm exactly what that was for? Certainly. David replied. That was the expedited passenger name change fee and the fare difference. Since the ticket for seat 3B was originally issued in your name, and the new passenger, Ms. Tessa Miller, did not have a profile in our system, the airline required a full reissue of the ticket at the current market rate. The total came to $4,200. I wrote the number down on my notepad. $4,200. They had spent over $4,000 of my money just to erase me. And who authorized that charge, I asked. Mr. Gordon Stewart, David said promptly. He called in yesterday afternoon. He mentioned that you were unable to make the trip due to a work emergency and that you had authorized him to handle the switch. I see, I said. And did you require written authorization for a charge of that magnitude on a card that does not bear his name? Yes, of course. David sounded slightly defensive now. We follow strict protocol. Mr. Stewart emailed over the authorization form signed by you, along with a copy of your driver's license. My blood ran cold. The driver's license. Dad had a copy of my license from when I rented a car for them last Christmas. He had kept it. He had kept everything. David, I said, keeping my tone even, could you please forward that authorization email to me right now? I need it for my expense report. Absolutely. Sending it now to the email on file. Thank you. I hung up. A moment later, my inbox pinged. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF. I zoomed in to 400%. There it was, the authorization to charge. The signature was the same one I had seen on the table the shaky, pixelated Stella J. Stewart lifted from the birthday card. But the driver's license was what made me lean closer to the screen. It was a scan of a scan. You could see the faint gray lines running horizontally across the image, the artifacts of a cheap home printer. But what caught my eye was the date. The date next to my signature had been typed in using a different font than the rest of the form. They had used a standard Times New Roman to fill in the date. While the form itself was in Arial, it was a sloppy, arrogant mistake. I saved the file to a folder I named Exhibit A Identity Fraud. Next, I called the bank. This was a delicate operation. If I reported the fraud immediately and fully, the bank would shut down the card instantly, the transaction would be declined, the tickets would be voided, and my family would know I was on to them before I had the full picture. I needed to keep the line open just long enough to see how deep the rot went. I navigated the automated menu until I reached the fraud department. This is Northbridge Risk Group calling on behalf of the account holder, I said, slipping into my professional persona. I am flagging a series of transactions for monitoring. I do not want to close the card yet. I want to place a trace on all activity originating from the United Arab Emirates or travel agencies within the next week. We can set up a conditional alert, the agent said, but if you suspect unauthorized use, we recommend immediate closure. I am gathering evidence for a potential civil dispute. I lied smoothly. Please just note the file that the charge for $4,200 is under contest. I will submit the affidavit of forgery within 48 hours. Understood. The note has been added. I hung up. The trap was set. Now I needed to see what else they had bought with my credit line. I logged into the hotel portal for the Burj Al Arab. My login credentials still worked. Thankfully, I went to the upcoming stays tab. The reservation was there. 2 suites, one for Mr. A. and Mrs. Gordon Stewart, one for Mr. Evan Stewart and Miss Tessa Miller. I clicked on the details for Evan's room. My eyes narrowed. There was an add-on package attached to the room. It was titled The Royal Romance Experience. I expanded the item. It included a private helicopter transfer from the airport, a daily couples massage, and a bottle of vintage champagne upon arrival. The cost was $3,500. I checked the payment method. It was my card. I checked the timestamp of the booking. It was added 3 hours ago. They were not just taking my spot. They were looting the treasury. They were gorging themselves on my credit limit because they thought I was too cowed by family duty to stop them. They were treating my bank account like an open buffet. I took a screenshot. Exhibit B, unauthorized upgrades. Then I went to the daily itinerary. I had built the original schedule in a shared Google Calendar, but Dad had evidently moved it to a professional travel management app, which the concierge had given me access to. I scrolled through the days. Day 1 arrival. Day 2, city tour. Day 3, desert safari. I paused at day 3, in the middle of the afternoon block, between lunch at Pierschick and sunset dune bashing. There was a new entry. It did not look like a tourist activity. 1,400 hours to 1,600 hours. Meeting, Desert Meridian Consulting. Location, Jumeirah Conference Center. Room B. I frowned. Desert Meridian Consulting. Why would my father, a man who ran a mid-sized hardware supply chain in North Carolina, be meeting with a consulting firm in Dubai? And why was it on the family itinerary? I opened a new tab and searched for Desert Meridian Consulting Dubai. The results were sparse. A generic landing page, a stock photo of a handshake, no detailed team page, no client list. Just a vague mission statement about bridging capital and opportunity in emerging markets. I dug deeper. I used a paid database tool I had access to through my work, a tool we use to vet international vendors. I plugged in the name. The company was registered only 6 months ago. The registered agent was a law firm in Panama, but the contact email listed for administrative inquiries was a Gmail address, DMC, Financial, Services Gmail.com. It smelled wrong. It smelled like a shell. It smelled like the kind of fake entity people set up when they want to move money without paying taxes, or when they want to make a bribe look like a consulting fee. I looked back at the itinerary. The meeting was 2 hours long. I realized then that the Dubai trip was not just about the wedding. It was not just about the Jubilee. Gordon Stewart was not flying halfway across the world just to ride a camel. He was going there to do business. And he was using my money to fund the logistics of a trip that was likely a cover for something else. I looked at the bank transfers I had pulled the night before. I looked at the pattern of withdrawals from the family fund that I had contributed to over the years. There was a withdrawal 2 months ago, $10,000. It was listed in Dad's ledger as venue deposit. But I knew the wedding venue. I had checked their rates. They did not require a deposit that high. Where did that $10,000 go? I had a sinking suspicion that if I could see the bank records of Desert Meridian Consulting, I would find a deposit of $10,000 from a Mr. Gordon Stewart. The pieces were clicking together with the terrifying precision of a rifle bolt. They needed me to pay for the trip because Dad's liquidity was tied up in this investment. They needed me to stay home because if I were there, sitting at the lunch table, I would ask questions. I would ask why Dad was disappearing for 2 hours in the middle of the day. I would ask who Desert Meridian was. They removed me not just to give Tessa a seat. They removed me because I was a liability. I was the auditor. And you do not bring the auditor to the scene of the crime. I sat back. My coffee had gone cold. I had enough. I had the forgery. I had the theft of services. And now I had the motive. I needed to fire a warning shot. I needed them to know that I was watching, but I needed to do it in a way that would make them panic, not retreat. I wanted them to get on that plane. I wanted them to fly all the way to Dubai, thinking they had gotten away with it, only to find the ground crumbling beneath them when they landed. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. To Gordon Stewart. Subject signature. I did not write a long paragraph. I did not ask how could you. I did not beg. I typed one single line. Dad, we need to talk about the signature on the authorization form. I hit send. I watched the screen. My email client had a tracking pixel embedded in the message. It would tell me when the email was opened. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes passed. Then, the notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Opened by Gordon Stewart. Location Charlotte. NC. Device iPhone. He had seen it. I waited for the phone to ring. I waited for the angry text. I waited for the excuse. But nothing came. The silence stretched out. I smiled. It was a cold, humorless smile. He wasn't calling because he was scrambling. He was calling Mom. He was calling Tessa. He was trying to figure out how much I knew. He was trying to figure out if I was guessing or if I had proof. He would try to bluff. He would try to say I was crazy, but he didn't know that I had already downloaded the PDF. He didn't know I had the metadata. He didn't know that Desert Meridian was now on my radar. I closed my laptop. The first layer of the paint had been peeled back. Underneath the family jubilee, there was rot, and I was going to expose every square inch of it. I picked up my phone and sent a text to the only person in the family I still trusted. Aunt Valerie, are you free for coffee? I need to show you something involving Dad's accounts. It was time to expand the investigation. The email to my father sat in his inbox, marked as read, a digital landmine that he had stepped on but not yet triggered. While he sweated in silence, likely consulting with my mother on how to gaslight me further, I turned my attention away from the immediate theft of my vacation and toward the larger ecosystem of the Stewart family finances. In my profession, we have a rule: fraud is rarely an isolated event. It is a habit. It is a muscle that gets stronger the more it is exercised. If my father was willing to forge his daughter's signature to save $4,000, what was he willing to do for $40,000 or $400,000? I opened a new tab on my browser and logged into a secure cloud storage drive I had set up years ago. As the capable one, I had often been tasked with digitizing family records, tax returns, property deeds, investment summaries. Dad had handed me boxes of paper receipts and asked me to make them make sense for the accountant. I had done so, but I had also kept copies. I started tracing the family investment fund. This was a casual, high-pressure pool of money that Dad managed. He had convinced his siblings, my aunts and uncles, that he had access to exclusive, high-yield real estate bonds through his business contacts. For a decade, they had been writing him checks, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. It was their retirement padding, their rainy day funds. I pulled up the ledger I had created 2 years ago, the last time I had formally reconciled the accounts. Then, I cross-referenced it with the transaction history from the joint account Dad used to move this money. I had access to this account because my name was technically on it as a successor trustee, a safety measure in case Dad died. He had likely forgotten that detail. I saw the pattern immediately. It was crude, but effective. Money would come in from Aunt Valerie or Uncle Mike. It would sit in the holding account for 3 weeks to a month. Then, a large transfer would be made to an entity called SH Holdings. I traced SH Holdings. It was a shell, and the money that went into it inevitably flowed out within 48 hours to pay for personal liabilities. 3 years ago, $12,000 out to a luxury car dealership. That was the month Dad got his new BMW. 2 years ago, $8,000 out to a contractor. That was the month Mom got her kitchen remodeled. It was a Ponzi scheme, but without the payouts. He was just eating their capital and telling them it was growing. But then I saw a new pattern emerge in the last 6 months. The frequency of withdrawals had increased, and the beneficiary had changed. 6 months ago, $5,000 to Bridals by Elena. That was Tessa's dress shop. 4 months ago, $3,000 to Prestige Jewelers. That was Tessa's engagement ring. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Dad was not paying for the wedding. My aunts and uncles were paying for the wedding, and they did not even know it. And then, the smoking gun. 2 weeks ago, a transfer of $15,000 was made from the family fund to Desert Meridian Consulting. I froze. Desert Meridian Consulting, the same company Dad was scheduled to meet in Dubai for 2 hours. The mysterious business meeting sandwiched between lunch and dune bashing. The Dubai trip was not just a vacation, it was the laundering point. Dad was moving a significant chunk of the family's money offshore, disguised as a consulting fee. likely to cash it out or hide it in a jurisdiction where his siblings could not sue him to get it back, and he was taking Tessa with him. Why Tessa? I switched gears. I needed to understand the woman who was currently packing her bags to take my seat. I logged into a professional background check service Northbridge subscribed to. It was expensive, thorough, and far deeper than a simple Google search. I typed in Tessa Miller. The report came back clean. Too clean. Credit score 720, no criminal record, current address listed as my brother's apartment, but in forensic accounting, we look for gaps. I looked at her social security trace. There was a period of 3 years, starting 7 years ago, where Tessa Miller seemed to have no financial footprint, no credit cards opened, no utility bills. I looked at the known aliases section. Usually, this is just misspellings. But there was one name that popped up linked to an old address in Florida. Teresa Vance. I ran a new search for Teresa Vance. The screen filled with red flags. Teresa Vance, born in Tampa, Florida. Age matches Tessa. Civil judgment, 3 years ago. Plaintiff American Express. Amount $12,000. Status unpaid. Civil judgment 4 years ago. Plaintiff, the Grand Floridian Resort. Amount $5,000 for theft of services. I pulled the docket for the resort case. The details were dry. Legal text. But the story was clear. The defendant had checked into a suite using a credit card that was later reported as compromised. She had racked up room service and spa charges, then vanished before the card was declined. I sat back in my chair. The air in my apartment felt heavy. Tessa was not just a gold digger, she was a professional grifter. She had changed her name, moved north, and reinvented herself as the sweet, naive girl who just wanted a family, and she had found the perfect mark in the Stewart family. We were obsessed with appearance. We were desperate to look successful, and my brother Evan was desperate to be loved. I realized then why Evan was so quiet, so submissive. I went back to the shared family drive. I looked for a folder I had seen briefly a few months ago, something Evan had mentioned in passing. The prenup. I found it. Stewart Miller Agreement Draft. B2 PDF. I opened it. I expected to see a document protecting Evan's non-existent assets. Instead, I found something much darker. It was not a prenuptial agreement in the traditional sense. It was a joint financial venture agreement. The legalese was dense, but I parsed it. The document stated that both parties agreed to consolidate all future debts and assets into a single liability structure, but Clause 4 Section B was the killer. In the event of joint enterprise investments, the primary signatory, Evan Stewart, assumes full liability for any leveraged capital provided by the secondary signatory's guarantors. It was gibberish to a layman. To me, it meant this dad was setting up a structure where he could borrow money in Evan's name, or use Evan's credit, and if things went south, Evan would be on the hook for the debt, not Dad, and not Tessa. And Tessa had signed it, because she knew exactly what it was. She and Dad were working together. I stared at the screen. The betrayal was so layered it was almost architectural. Dad needed liquid cash to keep his lifestyle afloat. He had drained the relatives. Now he needed a new line of credit. He couldn't get one himself, so he was using Evan. Tessa was the facilitator, the partner who encouraged Evan to sign the scary papers because it is just for our future, honey. In exchange, Tessa got her debts wiped, paid by the family fund, a new identity, and a luxury lifestyle, and the Dubai trip. The payment to Desert Meridian Consulting was $15,000. The trip cost me $30,000. That was $45,000 of capital moving around this event. If I had gone on that trip, I would have been in the room. I would have been at the dinners. I would have seen the receipts. I would have heard the way Dad spoke to this consultant. I would have realized that Desert Meridian was a shell. I was the risk. By removing me, they were not just saving a seat. They were removing the security camera. They needed me to stay in Charlotte, blind and compliant, while they finalized the transfer of the stolen family funds into whatever black hole they had dug in the desert. I felt a surge of nausea, followed by a surge of adrenaline. This was not a family dispute. This was a crime in progress. I closed the browser windows. I needed to act. But I could not just scream fraud at them. They would deny it. They would say I was jealous. They would say I was crazy. I needed indisputable proof. I needed the victims to testify. I picked up my phone. It was almost noon. I called Aunt Valerie. Valerie was my father's oldest sister. She was 70 years old, a retired schoolteacher who lived in a small bungalow and drove a 10-year-old Honda. She was the kindest woman I knew. She had trusted my father with her life savings because he was her successful little brother. "Hello, Stella." Her voice was warm, but surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Your mom said you were having a hard time with the trip changes." "I am fine, Aunt Val," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I need to see you. It is about the investment fund, the one Dad manages." There was a pause. "Oh, is it done well? Your father said we might be seeing a big return soon." My heart broke a little. "I have some paperwork I need to review with you. Can I come over? Now?" "Of course, honey. The kettle is on." I grabbed my laptop and my portable printer. I drove to her house in a daze. When I arrived, I did not waste time with pleasantries. I sat her down at her kitchen table. I opened my laptop. I did not show her the scary graphs first. I showed her the transfers. "Aunt Val," I said, "do you remember writing a check for $5,000 last June? You said it was for the bond fund." "Yes," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Here's that $5,000, I said, pointing to the screen. "It went into Dad's holding account on June 4th. On June 6th, $5,000 was transferred to Bridals by Elena." She stared at the screen. "Who is Elena?" "It is a dress shop," I said gently. "It paid for Tessa's wedding dress." Valerie went pale. "No, Gordon said that money was in municipal bonds. He sent me a statement. I suspect the statement was typed up on his home computer." I said, "Val, I need you to be brave. I think he has spent it all. Yours, Uncle Mike's, Aunt Janice's." She put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. "But why?" "He has so much. He has the appearance of much." I said, "He has debt. And now, he is taking a $30,000 trip to Dubai using my money, and he is meeting a fake consultant to move what is left of your money out of the country." She looked at me. The shock was turning into something else. The anger of a woman who had been frugal her whole life, only to be robbed by her own blood. "What do we do?" she whispered. "I need a list." I said, "I need to know exactly who gave him money and how much. And I need you to not say a word to him. Not yet." Valerie nodded. She got up and went to her filing cabinet. She pulled out a notebook. It was a handwritten ledger. I kept track. She said, "Because the others asked me to." She handed it to me. I opened it. The numbers were staggering. Over the last 5 years, the extended family had entrusted Gordon Stewart with over $200,000. I looked at the total. I looked at my laptop where the audit file was open. I had the forgery. I had the fake name. I had the shell company. And now, I had the scale of the theft. I asked Valerie for permission to scan the notebook. She agreed. I drove back to my apartment. I spent the next 4 hours building the master document. I merged the bank transfers with Valerie's handwritten notes. I overlaid the timeline of Tessa's expenses with the withdrawals. I added the background check on Teresa Vance. I printed it all out. It was a thick stack of paper, heavy and warm from the printer. I placed it in a binder. I labeled the spine project Jubilee Audit Findings. I looked at the clock. It was 7 in the evening. The flight to Dubai was in 3 days. They were probably packing right now. Dad was probably making a toast about new beginnings. Tessa was probably practicing her new signature. They thought they were flying toward a life of luxury. They did not know they were currently standing on a trapdoor. I picked up the binder. It felt like a weapon. If this is real, I thought, looking at the damning rows of numbers, they are not just going to miss a flight. They are going to lose everything. And the terrifying part was, I was the only one who could stop it, or I was the only one who could push the button. I reached for my phone. I sent a text to Evan. "We need to have a family briefing before you leave. I have sorted out the payment issues. Come to Dad's house tomorrow night. Bring Tessa. It was time to set the stage. The email I sent regarding the signature did exactly what I intended it to do. It did not provoke a screaming match. It provoked a negotiation. My father asked to meet me at a coffee shop on the edge of town, far away from the country club where he held court and the church where my mother played the role of the saintly matriarch. It was a neutral ground, or so he thought. To me, it was just another interrogation room. I arrived 5 minutes early. I sat with my back to the wall, watching the door. When Gordon Stewart walked in, he looked older than he had 2 nights ago. His shoulders were slumped, and the confident stride he usually employed to intimidate waiters and junior associates was gone. He looked like a man carrying a heavy, invisible stone. He ordered a black coffee. I ordered nothing. I did not want to owe him even the price of a latte. He sat down and wrapped both hands around the paper cup. He did not look me in the eye. "Stella," he began, his voice low and raspy, "we need to resolve this. It has gone too far." "I agree," I said. "When are you canceling the trip and refunding my money?" He winced. He looked around the cafe to ensure no one was listening. "I cannot cancel," he hissed. "Everything is in motion. The deposits are non-refundable. The meetings are set. The meetings with Desert Meridian." I asked. His head snapped up. Genuine fear flashed in his eyes. It was the look of a man who realizes the person sitting across from him is not a child, but a prosecutor. "You have been snooping." He said, accusations dripping from the word. "I have been auditing." I corrected. "There is a difference. Snooping is looking for secrets. Auditing is verifying facts. And the fact is, you forged my signature to steal $4,000 in change fees, and you are using my credit line to fund a trip that is actually a money laundering run." "Lower your voice," he commanded. Though his own voice was shaking, he leaned across the table. The fatherly mask slid back into place, but it was crooked now. "Listen to me, Stella. I know you are hurt. I know you feel left out. But you do not understand the pressure I am under. This deal, this consulting arrangement, it is going to fix everything. It is going to pay back everyone. I just need liquidity to get it started. So you stole from me." I said. "I borrowed," he insisted, "and I will pay you back double. Look, what do you want? You want the $30,000 back? I will sign a promissory note right now. I will give you $50,000. Just wait until I get back from Dubai. Just let the plane take off." He was trying to bribe me with money he did not have, to cover up the theft of money he had already spent. "I do not want a promissory note," I said, cold and flat. "I want to know why you signed my name." "Because you are stubborn," he snapped, losing his cool. "Because you would have asked questions. You are destroying this family over a technicality. Stella, you are willing to send your brother into a marriage broke and humiliated just to prove you are right. I am not the one who committed a felony," I said, "and I am not the one who introduced a grifter into the family." Dad stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You watch your mouth. Tessa is a good woman. She is saving Evan. She is burying him." I said, "And you are handing her the shovel." He stared at me with pure venom. "If you do anything to stop this trip, Stella, you are no daughter of mine. I think we established that when you gave my seat to a stranger." I replied. He stormed out. He left his coffee untouched on the table. I watched him go. I felt a pang of sadness, deep and dull, but I smothered it immediately. Sadness was a luxury I could not afford, not when the enemy was regrouping. By the time I got back to my car, the second wave of the attack had begun. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tessa. "Stella, please, I know you are angry, but you need to think about Evan. He is so fragile right now. He has been having panic attacks about the wedding. If you make this into a legal issue, if you drag the police into this, it will break him. He looks up to you. Do not destroy his hero. Please, for Evan's sake, let it go. We can work this out when we get back." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was using my love for my brother as a human shield. She was painting me as the aggressor and Evan as the victim, implicating that any action I took to protect myself was an act of violence against him. I did not reply. I took a screenshot. Exhibit C: coercion. I went home and prepared for the next day. I knew my father. When negotiation failed, he resorted to intimidation, and since he could not physically intimidate me, he would go after the one thing I valued more than my bank account, my reputation. The blow landed at 10:15 the next morning. I was at my desk at Northbridge, reviewing a flagged transaction for a client in the pharmaceutical sector. My office phone rang. It was the executive assistant to the director of compliance. "Stella, can you come up to the 4th floor? The director needs to see you." Now. It was not a request. I walked to the elevator. My stomach churned, but my face was a mask of professional detachment. I walked into the director's office. He was a stern man named Marcus, someone I respected deeply. He looked uncomfortable. "Sit down, Stella," Marcus said. He pushed a piece of paper across the desk. It was a transcript of a phone call received on the anonymous ethics hotline an hour ago. Caller claims that Senior Officer Stella Stewart is utilizing Northbridge proprietary software and database access to conduct unauthorized surveillance on private citizens, specifically family members and their associates. Caller alleges you are harvesting financial data for personal vendettas. It was the nuclear option, in my field. An accusation of data misuse is a career death sentence. Even the rumor of it can get you blacklisted. Dad had called, or maybe Tessa. It didn't matter. They had tried to get me fired to cut off my resources and discredit my testimony. Marcus looked at me. "Stella, you know I have to open a formal inquiry. This is a termination-level offense if true." I did not flinch. I did not apologize. I reached into my bag and pulled out a flash drive. "I expected this," I said calmly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I am currently conducting a personal audit regarding identity theft committed against me." I stated clearly, "I have been careful to firewall my personal investigation from my professional duties. I have not used a single Northbridge code, client login, or proprietary database." I pointed to the flash drive. "On this drive, you will find a timeline of every search I have conducted in the last 72 hours. You will see receipts for the public record searches, paid for with my personal credit card. You will see the logs from the background check service, which I subscribe to personally as a freelancer. I access them from my personal laptop, on my home network." I leaned forward. "The person who called you is likely the perpetrator of the fraud I am investigating. They are trying to weaponize this department to silence a victim. I am formally reporting this attempt at retaliation to you and the HR department." Marcus looked at the drive, then at me. He saw the steel in my eyes. He knew my work. He knew I was meticulous. "I still have to run the internal audit," Marcus said, but his voice was softer. "It will have to scrape your workstation." "Do it," I said. "You will find nothing but work." "Okay," Marcus said. "I will suspend the inquiry pending the IT review. You are clear to work. But Stella, keep your home life at home." "I am trying," I said. "But they just brought it to the office." I walked back to my desk. My hands were trembling slightly now. That had been close. If I had been sloppy, if I had used the company LexisNexis account just once to check Tessa's name, I would be walking out with a cardboard box right now. But I wasn't sloppy, and now I was furious. They had tried to take my livelihood. They had crossed the line from family drama into total war. I checked my personal email. Dad had been busy. There was a new email in the extended family thread. Subject: prayers for Stella. "Dear family, I write this with a heavy heart. Stella is going through a severe mental health crisis. The stress of her job has finally gotten to her. She is becoming paranoid and delusional. She has created a fantasy that we are stealing from her. It is heartbreaking to watch. We are going to Dubai to give her space to heal. But please, if she contacts you with wild accusations, just ignore her. She needs rest, not engagement. We are handling it." He was isolating me. He was painting me as the crazy spinster so that when the truth came out, everyone would view it through the lens of my breakdown. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. I did not reply to his email. I did not write a long defense. I did not attach the PDF of the forgery. I picked up my phone and opened the family WhatsApp group. It contained 30 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. I typed a single message. To anyone who has contributed money to Gordon Stewart's family investment fund or bond portfolio in the last 5 years, please direct message me immediately. I am conducting an audit of the accounts. I hit send. For 10 seconds. Nothing happened. Then, the phone began to buzz. Buzz. Uncle Mike. Buzz. Cousin Sarah. Buzz. Aunt Janice. Buzz. 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 The messages poured in like rain. Stella. I gave him $10,000 last year. Is it okay I sent $5,000 for the wedding fund? Why Stella? He said the bond matured next month. What is going on? I gave him my settlement check. $15,000. I watched the numbers climb. It wasn't just $200,000. It was closer to $300,000. He had taken money from Cousin Sarah's college fund. He had taken money from Uncle Mike's disability settlement. Every ping was a piece of evidence. Every text was a nail in the coffin of the Stewart family brand. I spent the rest of the afternoon replying with a standard template. Please send me a screenshot of the transfer or a photo of the check. I am compiling a master file. I did not tell them it was gone. Not yet. I just gathered the data. By 6 in the evening, I had a digital pile of receipts that would send my father to prison for 5 years. I left the office and walked to my car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. My phone rang again. I looked at the screen. It was Evan. I answered. Hello? Evan. His voice was small, broken. Sis, he stammered. Tessa. Tessa is freaking out. She says you are hacking her. She says you are ruining everything. I am not hacking anyone. I said, I am balancing the books. Dad is saying Dad says you are sick. Evan said, he sounded like he was crying. But Aunt Val called me. She said you showed her proof. Proof about the dress money. I did. I said, there was a long silence on the other end. Sis, Evan whispered, do you really have it? The proof I have everything. Evan, the signatures, the bank transfers, the shell company. Desert Meridian, he asked. The company Dad is meeting. Yes, it is a fake company. Evan, they are moving the money offshore. I heard a sharp intake of breath. Evan, I said, softening my voice, I need you to look at me. Not at Dad. Not at Tessa. Look at the facts. You are about to marry a woman who has a history of fraud, and you are about to get on a plane paid for with stolen money. If you get on that flight, you are an accomplice. I do not know what to believe. He sobbed. Then come see me, I said, tomorrow night, before the rehearsal dinner. Come to Dad's house. I am holding a briefing. Tessa won't let me go alone. He said. Good, I replied. Bring her. Bring her parents. Bring everyone. I want them all to see it. His voice trembled. Are you sure Tessa isn't lying? Are you sure she isn't just mistaken, Evan? I said, grifters do not make mistakes. They make plans. I hung up. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin. The text message from Evan came at 6 in the morning. It was brief, fearful, and carried the clandestine urgency of a hostage trying to contact the outside world. Meet me at Freedom Park, the bench by the lake. 8 a.m. Don't tell Dad. I arrived at 7:45. The park was quiet, save for a few joggers exhaling plumes of mist into the crisp morning air. I sat on the damp wooden bench, clutching a folder against my chest. It wasn't the thick, comprehensive binder I had prepared for the family confrontation. It was a slimmer dossier, curated specifically for my brother. Evan arrived 10 minutes late. He was walking fast, looking over his shoulder as if he expected Tessa to pop out from behind an oak tree. When he got closer, my heart broke a little. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he hadn't shaved. He wore a hoodie that was slightly too large for him, making him look less like a 30-year-old man about to get married and more like the teenager who used to come into my room to ask for help with his math homework. He sat down on the far end of the bench, leaving a foot of space between us. She is at yoga, he said, his voice raspy. I told her I was going to get coffee. Hello, Evan, I said softly. He rubbed his face with both hands. Dad is going crazy. Stella, he is saying you have lost your mind. He says you are threatening to sue the family. He is talking about restraining orders. And what does Tessa say? I asked. Evan flinched at her name. She is scared. She says you are obsessed with her. She says you are jealous because I finally found someone who puts me first. I looked at the ducks gliding across the glass-like surface of the pond. Is that what they told you? That I was removed from the trip because I was jealous? Evan looked down at his sneakers. He began to pick at a loose thread on his jeans. Dad said you were spiraling, Evan admitted, his voice barely a whisper. He told me that you have always been controlling, that you use money to hold power over us. He said that having you in Dubai would be toxic, that Tessa needed to feel safe, and you made her feel judged. I nodded slowly. It was a smart narrative. It used my competence against me. Because I was the one who organized everything, it was easy to paint me as the dictator. Evan, I said, turning to face him, I want you to look at something, and I want you to promise me you will just look. You do not have to say anything, just look. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first document. It was the credit card authorization form for the name change. The one with the pixelated, cut-and-paste signature. You know my handwriting. I said, you have seen it on birthday cards for 3 decades. He looked at the paper. He squinted at the signature line. It looks weird, he said. It is a photocopy. I explained. Dad took it from an old card. He pasted it here to authorize a charge of $4,200 on my credit card. That charge was to remove my name and add Tessa's. Evan shook his head. No. Tessa said she told me you offered. She said you called Dad and said, let Tessa have my seat. It is my wedding gift to them. She cried about it. Stella. She said it was the nicest thing anyone had ever done for her. If it was a gift, I asked gently, why would Dad need to forge my signature to process the ticket? Evan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The logic was simple, undeniable, and it struck him like a physical blow. If I had offered, I would have signed the paper myself. I would have forwarded the email. There would be no need for scissors and glue. I don't know, he stammered. Maybe he just didn't want to bother you. $4,000 is not a bother. Evan, it is a felony. I flipped the page. I showed him the bank statement highlighting the charge. I paid for the trip. I said, I paid for the name change that kicked me off the trip, and I am currently paying for the Royal Romance package attached to your hotel room. Did you know that Evan went pale? The helicopter transfer, Tessa said her parents paid for that. She said it was a surprise from the Millers. Her parents didn't pay a dime. I said, I did. I watched the realization wash over him. It wasn't just anger. It was humiliation. He had been walking around thinking he was the recipient of generous love from his fiancée's family, only to find out he was consuming his sister's stolen credit limit. Why, he asked, his voice cracking. Why would they lie about who paid because they need you to believe the fairy tale? I said, they need you to believe that Tessa comes from money, that she adds value. If you knew the truth, you might ask to see the receipts. I took a deep breath. This next part was the hardest. Evan, tell me about the papers you signed last week, the ones Dad gave you. He looked up, surprised. The prenup. What about it? Dad said it was to protect me. Since the business is growing, he said we needed to make sure everything was separate. Did you read it? Dad summarized it for me. Evan said defensively. It was full of legal stuff. He said it just keeps our assets distinct. I read it. I said, I found a copy in the shared drive before Dad locked me out. I pulled out the highlighted copy of the joint financial venture agreement. It is not a prenup. Evan, it is a liability swap. It says that any debt incurred by the joint enterprise that means Dad and Tessa's projects is guaranteed by you. You didn't sign a shield. You signed a target. You agreed to be the co-signer for loans you haven't even seen yet. Evan stared at the document. He traced the words with his finger. Leveraged capital primary signatory. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a childlike fear. Why would Dad do that? Because he is broke. Evan, I said bluntly. He has spent the family fund. He has spent Aunt Valerie's savings. He needs a fresh credit profile to borrow more money, and yours is the only one left that is clean. Tessa is helping him get it. Stop it. Evan stood up. He walked a few paces away, hands gripping his hair. Stop saying that about her. You don't know her. She loves me. Does she? I asked. I didn't stand up. I stayed seated. An anchor in his storm. Does she love you, Evan? Or does she love the idea of being a steward? He turned back to me, tears streaming down his face. She is the only person who listens to me. She understands me. She has had a hard life. Stella. She told me everything. Her ex was abusive. She had to run away. She is a survivor. Did she tell you her name used to be Teresa Vance? The air left the conversation. Evan froze. What Teresa Vance? I repeated. From Tampa, Florida. I pulled out the final document. It was the background check. It was the docket from the civil suit at the Grand Floridian Resort. She didn't change her name because of an abusive ex. Evan, she changed it because she had a judgment against her for $12,000 in unpaid hotel bills. She was sued for theft of services. She checks into high-end places, lives the life, and then vanishes when the bill comes. I held the paper out to him. She is not a victim. She is a professional guest. Evan looked at the paper. He didn't take it. He just stared at the mugshot from the previous arrest, a younger, less polished version of the woman he was about to marry. The eyes were the same. The calculation was the same. He sat back down heavily. The fight had gone out of him. I asked her, Evan whispered, last night, after you called. I asked her if she had ever been to Florida. She said no. She said she hates the humidity. He put his head in his hands. Why didn't they let me know, he asked. Why am I always the last one to know anything in this family? Because they think you are weak. I said, it was cruel, but it was necessary. They think you will do whatever they say if they smile at you and tell you you're a good boy. Dad thinks he owns you. Tessa thinks she played you. Evan looked at me. For the first time in years, I saw a spark of something real in his eyes. It wasn't confidence, not yet, but it was anger. A quiet, simmering anger. I am 30 years old. He said, then start acting like it. I said, don't take my word for it. Don't take Dad's word. Verify. I placed the folder on the bench between us. We are having a meeting tonight at Dad's house. 7 o'clock. I am bringing the full audit, every bank transfer, every forged signature. I'm going to put it all on the table. Dad called it a briefing. Evan said, he said you were coming over to apologize. I laughed. A short, dry sound. It is a briefing. All right, but I'm not apologizing. I am foreclosing on their lies. You want me to come. I want you to be there. I said, I want you to see the truth before you get on that plane. If you see the evidence and you still want to go, if you still want to marry her and sign those loans, that is your choice. I will never mention it again. But you have the right to know what you are buying. Evan picked up the folder. He held it like it was radioactive. Tessa won't want to come, he said. She is terrified of you. She isn't terrified of me, I corrected. She is terrified of being found out. Evan stood up. He looked at the folder, then at me. She told me this morning that her parents are in town. Evan said, she wants to bring them to the briefing, to show support, to intimidate you. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. Her parents. I asked, the ones who supposedly paid for the helicopter, Bring them, I said. Bring everyone. The more people in that room, the better. Are you sure? Stella Evan asked. It is going to be a bloodbath. No, Evan, I said, standing up and smoothing my coat. A bloodbath is messy. This is going to be an audit. And audits are very, very precise. I watched my brother walk away. He walked differently than he had when he arrived. He wasn't looking over his shoulder anymore. He was looking at the folder in his hand. He was beginning to read the fine print. And I knew that once he started reading, he wouldn't be able to stop. The stage was set. I had the evidence. I had the motive. And now, thanks to Tessa's arrogance, I had an audience. I checked my watch. 9 hours until showtime. The invitation I sent out was a masterpiece of corporate aggression disguised as administrative helpfulness. I did not send a dramatic text message. I did not make a tearful phone call. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a formal calendar event. Event Stewart Family Dubai Trip. Final Logistics Briefing. Location: the residence of Gordon and Marilyn Stewart. Time 7 p.m. Attendees all travelers. Contributing investors: Aunt Valerie, Uncle Mike, Aunt Janice, and extended family. I added a note in the description field, written in the dry, neutral tone of a project manager agenda to include final itinerary confirmation, travel insurance waivers, payment verification, and legal document review. Attendance is mandatory for all parties involved in the financing or participation of the Jubilee. I hit send. It was the financing part that ensured the audience, my aunts and uncles, who had been nervous since my text messages yesterday, would be there because they were worried about their money. Dad would be there because it was his house. And Tessa's parents, the Millers, would be there because Tessa wanted them as a buffer. She had been busy all morning trying to seize control of the narrative. My phone pinged incessantly with notifications from the family group chat. Tessa was love-bombing us. Ping, a photo of a white linen dress laid out on a bed. Caption: cannot wait to wear this for the welcome dinner, thank you. Mom and Dad. Stewart. Ping, a photo of travel-sized toiletries. Caption: Evan is all packed. We are so ready for this adventure. Ping, a long, sappy message about how blessed she felt to be marrying into such a generous and close-knit clan. She was performing. She was trying to bury my silence under a mountain of digital glitter. She thought if she acted like the perfect, grateful daughter-in-law hard enough, it would make my questions seem petty and mean. She was trying to create a reality where the trip was inevitable, a moving train that could not be stopped. I let her post. I did not react. I did not put a thumbs up. I did not put an angry face. Silence is the loudest sound in the world when someone is desperate for validation. While she played on Instagram, I was working the phones. My first call was to the fraud department of my credit card issuer. This time, I was not just flagging a transaction, I was preparing a dossier. This is Stella Stewart. I said to the agent, I need to confirm the specific protocol for a dispute based on signature forgery. I am not initiating the chargeback this second, but I need the case reference number pre-generated for a pending investigation. We can do that. Ms. Stewart, the agent replied. Your case number is 4990 Alpha. Once you give the verbal authorization, we will freeze the card, reverse the $4,200 charge, and flag the merchant in this case, the travel agency for accepting fraudulent authorization, and the timeline for the reversal I asked. Immediate, the agent said. And since the travel agency will lose the funds instantly, they will likely void the associated tickets within the hour to mitigate their own loss. Perfect, I said. Keep that file open. I will call you tonight. I wrote the case number down on a sticky note. 499YoA. It looked like a random string of characters, but it was the kill code for the entire vacation. My next call was to David at Prestige Travel. David, this is Stella Stewart. I said, I am calling to place a strict security lock on the booking reference 472 Bravo 9. Ms. Stewart. David sounded tired. Your father called 3 times this morning checking on the status of the tickets. I am sure he did. I said, here's the instruction, no changes, no cancellations, and absolutely no reissuing of boarding passes are to be made without voice verification from me, the primary cardholder. If anyone tries to move a flight or change a seat, you call me first. If you process a change without my voice, I will include your agency in the civil suit for negligence. Understood, David said, his voice tightening. I have flagged the file. Do not touch. Good. The tickets need to remain active until exactly 9 o'clock tonight. Do not let them disappear before then. I hung up. I did not want the trip to be canceled secretly by Dad in a panic. I needed the tickets to be live. I needed them to be real. I needed everyone in that room to believe they were going to the airport tomorrow morning right up until the moment I proved they were not. I spent the rest of the afternoon building the presentation. I treated it exactly like a board meeting at Northbridge. I did not use emotional fonts. I did not use red exclamation points. I used black text on a white background. Helvetica. Clean. Cold. Irrefutable. I printed 6 copies of the slide deck. One for me, one for Dad, one for Mom, one for Evan, one for Tessa, and one for Aunt Valerie to share with the investors. Slide 1 timeline of events. It showed the date I paid for the trip, the date the Desert Meridian consulting firm was registered, and the date my name was removed from the manifest. Slide 2 source of funds. This was the heavy hitter. I had a flowchart. On the left, Stella's savings and Aunt Valerie's retirement. On the right, Tessa's wedding dress, B&W lease, and Desert Meridian Consulting. The arrows showed exactly where the money went. It was visual proof that the family pot was actually a funnel into Dad's lifestyle. Slide 3, the forgery. I placed the 2 signatures side by side, the legitimate one for my driver's license, and the pixelated, shaky one from the travel authorization. I added the metadata from the scan showing the date discrepancy. Slide 4, the beneficiary. This page was just the background check on Teresa Vance, the civil judgment, the alias, the unpaid bills. I put the pages in clear plastic covers and bound them into slim black folders. They looked professional. They looked official. They looked like the end of the world. At 5 o'clock, I received a text from Evan. I am coming. Tessa is bringing her parents. They are driving a rental. Dad is setting up the dining room like a buffet. He thinks if he feeds people, they won't get mad. Did you do what I asked? I texted back. Yes, Evan replied. I am going to ask about the joint venture agreement. I practiced the question. Good. Don't let him interrupt you. I won't. I am scared. Stella, you should be. I wrote, but it is better to be scared now than broke later. I showered and dressed. I chose a suit, navy blue, tailored. It was the suit I wore when I had to fire someone or deliver bad news to a client. It was armor. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. Minimal makeup. I packed my briefcase, the laptop, the binder from Aunt Valerie, the black presentation folders, the sticky note with the bank case number. I stood in my kitchen and drank a glass of water. My apartment was silent. The sun was going down, casting long shadows across the floor. I felt a strange sense of calm. For days, I had been reacting. I had been the victim, the one left behind, the one scrambling to understand why. But tonight, I was the one setting the tempo. I had built the stage, I had written the script, and I knew exactly how the third act was going to end. My phone rang. It was Dad. I stared at the screen. He was calling 2 hours before the meeting. He was breaking. I picked up. Hello? Gordon, I said. I did not call him Dad. Stella. His voice was low, vibrating with a mix of anger and desperation. I am asking you one last time. Do not do this. Do not do what I asked. Come to my own family's house. Do not make a scene, he said. The Millers are coming. My brothers and sisters are coming. If you walk in there and start waving papers around, if you humiliate me in front of these people. He paused, searching for a threat that would stick. If you do this, Stella, you are no longer my daughter. I will cut you off. You will not be welcome in this house again. You will be dead to us. The words should have hurt. A week ago. They would have devastated me. I would have cried. I would have begged for his approval. But I looked at the binder on my table. I looked at the evidence of how he had stolen from me, lied to me, and sold my seat to a con artist. He hadn't treated me like a daughter in years. He had treated me like a resource. You don't disown a resource. You just use it until it is empty. You are threatening to cut me off, I asked, my voice devoid of fear. Yes, he said. Totally. Gordon, I said. You already crossed me out. You erased my name from the ticket. You erased my name from the hotel. You tried to erase my identity to save $4,000. I picked up my briefcase. I am not coming to be your daughter tonight. I said, I am coming to be your auditor. And the audit is mandatory. Stella, he started to shout. I hung up. I walked out to my car. The city lights of Charlotte were blinking on, indifferent to the drama of the Stewart family. I drove to the house I grew up in, the house where I learned to ride a bike, where I learned to read, where I learned that if I wanted something done right, I had to do it myself. There were 6 cars in the driveway. It was a full house. I parked on the street. I didn't want to be blocked in. I wanted a clear exit route. I walked up the driveway. I could see them through the big bay window. Dad was pouring wine, his smile tight and manic. Mom was rushing around with a tray of appetizers. Tessa was holding court in the center of the room, her hand on Evan's arm, laughing at something her father said. They looked like a happy family. They looked like a success story. I gripped the handle of my briefcase. Enjoy the champagne, I thought. It is the last thing on the menu. I reached the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key. The lock clicked. The door swung open. The laughter inside didn't stop immediately. It took a second for them to notice me standing in the foyer, framed by the darkness of the night behind me. Then, silence rippled through the room. Starting from the door and spreading to the fireplace, Dad froze. The wine bottle suspended over a glass. Tessa's smile faltered, then fixed itself into a rigid mask of welcome. Stella, Mom chirped, her voice cracking with tension. You made it. Come in. Have a tart. I stepped inside. I closed the door behind me. I didn't smile. I didn't take off my coat. We are not here for tarts. Mom, I said. My voice carried to the back of the room. Everyone, please take a seat at the dining table. The briefing begins in 2 minutes. I walked past them, straight to the head of the table, the seat where Dad usually sat. I placed my briefcase on the mahogany surface. I heard the distinct click-click of the latches opening. I looked up. They were all staring at me. The confusion was starting to turn into dread. Please, I said, gesturing to the chairs. Sit down. We have a lot of numbers to get through before anyone flies to Dubai. The dining room table was set for 12, but it felt like a courtroom. My father had gone to great lengths to create an atmosphere of casual celebration. There were fresh flowers in the center, a roast cooling on the sideboard, and several bottles of expensive red wine breathing on the counter wine bought. I noted with a quick mental check, with funds that likely belonged to Uncle Mike. Dad was standing at the head of the table, his face flushed with a mixture of alcohol and adrenaline. He was playing the role of the benevolent patriarch, laughing too loudly at Mr. Miller's jokes. Tessa was moving around the table, filling glasses, her hand resting lingeringly on Evan's shoulder every time she passed him. She was wearing the white linen dress she had posted on Instagram, projecting the image of the virginal, blushing bride. My mother sat at the other end, her smile fixed and brittle. She looked like she was waiting for a bomb to go off. She was right. I sat in the middle, my black briefcase on the floor, the stack of presentation folders resting calmly under my hand. Beside me, Aunt Valerie sat with her purse clutched in her lap, her face pale. Across from me sat Tessa's parents, the Millers, 2 people who looked perfectly nice, perfectly respectable, and perfectly oblivious to the fact that they were dining in a house of cards. All right, everyone, Dad boomed, raising his glass. Before we eat, I just want to say how blessed we are. Tomorrow, we embark on a journey that celebrates not just Evan and Tessa, but the unity of our families. To the Stewarts and the Millers, here, Mr. Miller said, raising his glass. Tessa beamed. Thank you. Gordon, you are too generous. She looked at me. It was a dare. Say something. Her eyes said, ruining the toast makes you the villain. I did not pick up my wine glass. I picked up the black folders. That is a lovely sentiment. Dad, I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the murmurs of agreement like a scalpel. But before we get to the airport, we need to handle the administrative housekeeping. As the primary financier of the logistics, I need to verify a few compliance items. Dad's smile froze. Stella, not now. We are eating. It will only take 10 minutes, I said, sliding the first folder to Mr. Miller, then one to Uncle Mike, then one to Evan. Please, take one. It is the final briefing packet. Dad reached out to snatch the folder I slid toward him, his grip tight. This is unnecessary. It is mandatory. I corrected. Turn to page 1, please. The room went quiet. The only sound was the rustling of plastic covers turning. Item 1, payment verification and authorization. I read aloud, treating the dinner table exactly like a boardroom at Northbridge. On the screen of my laptop here, and in your packets. You will see a copy of the credit card authorization form used to remove my name from seat 3B and replace it with Ms. Tessa Miller. I turned my laptop around so the screen faced the Millers. As you can see, I continued, keeping my tone deadly flat. The signature on this form is dated October 12th. However, the metadata from the scan shows the signature block was created from a file dated last year. It is a photocopy of my signature from a birthday card. Dad slammed his folder shut. This is ridiculous. I told you. I signed it as your proxy because you were busy. You are twisting a simple favor into a conspiracy. A proxy requires a power of attorney. I said, this is a cut-and-paste forgery. I looked at Mr. Miller, who was frowning at the document. Mr. Miller, I said, addressing him directly. My father likely told you that he paid for this trip. Or perhaps that it was a joint family gift, Mr. Miller looked at Dad, then at me. Gordon said the business covered it. A corporate retreat write-off. The business did not cover it. I said, I did. $30,000 from my personal savings and credit lines. Tessa's mother gasped. $30,000 plus $4,200 for the name change, I added, and $3,500 for the Royal Romance package attached to Evan's suite, the helicopter transfer. That is on my Visa card. I saw Tessa's hand freeze on the neck of the wine bottle. She was staring at Evan, willing him to stop me, but Evan was looking at the folder. He was reading the numbers. I don't understand. Mrs. Miller said, looking at Mom. Marilyn, you said you guys surprised them with the helicopter. Mom looked down at her empty plate. She was trembling. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floorboards. She didn't say a word. Her silence was a confession. My daughter is confused. Dad interrupted, his voice rising. We pool our resources in this family. Stella's money is family money. She is just angry because she felt left out of the planning. Let's talk about pooling resources. I said, turn to page 2. Aunt Valerie took a deep breath. She looked at Uncle Mike, then at Dad. Gordon, Aunt Valerie said, her voice shaking but clear. Where is the $12,000 I gave you for the municipal bond fund? Dad turned to her, his eyes wide with betrayal. Valerie, you are siding with her. I am siding with my bank account, Valerie said. Stella showed me the transfers. Gordon, you didn't buy bonds. I pointed to the flowchart on page 2. This illustrates the flow of capital from the Family Investment Fund. I explained. Here is Aunt Valerie's check. Here is Uncle Mike's disability settlement. And here is where the money went. I traced the line with my finger. June 4th. $5,000 to Bridals by Elena. All eyes turned to Tessa's dress. She was wearing a different dress now, but the implication hung heavy in the air. August 10th. $3,000 to the BMW dealership, September 1st. $15,000 to Desert Meridian Consulting. The room was dead silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to have stopped. What is Desert Meridian? Uncle Mike asked. He was a large man, slow to anger, but his face was turning a dark shade of red. Is that the tour company? No, I said. Turn to page 3. I flipped my own page. Desert Meridian Consulting is a shell company registered in Panama 6 months ago. I said, there is no office. There is no staff. There is only a bank account. I looked at Dad. He was sweating now, profusely. The confident host was gone. In his place was a cornered animal. The meeting on your itinerary for tomorrow afternoon. I continued, the 2-hour block between lunch and the safari. That is not a tour. That is a handoff. I leaned forward. You are not going to Dubai to celebrate a wedding. You are going there to move the remaining $15,000 of the family's money into an offshore account where Uncle Mike and Aunt Valerie can't sue you for it. You are laundering their savings under the guise of a consulting fee. Mr. Miller stood up. He threw his napkin on the table. Gordon, is this true? Are you stealing from your siblings to pay for my daughter's wedding? It is a loan, Dad shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The wine glasses rattled. It is leverage. I am building an empire here. You people don't understand finance. I move money to make money. You move money to buy respect. You can't afford. I said. Shut up. Dad pointed a shaking finger at me. You are jealous. You are bitter because you are alone. You are trying to destroy Evan's happiness because you don't have any of your own. Speaking of Evan, I said, turning to my brother. Evan was sitting very still. He hadn't touched his wine. He was staring at page 4 of the packet, the page with the background check. Evan, I said softly. Evan stood up. He held the paper in his hand. He looked at Tessa. Tessa moved toward him. Baby, don't look at that. She faked it. She is good with computers. She can make anything look real. Did she fake the mugshot? Evan asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried a terrifying weight. Tessa stopped. Evan, please, she whispered. Not here. Not in front of my parents. Did you read the marriage contract? Evan asked, his voice rising. The one Dad made me sign, the one you told me was just standard. He looked at Dad. It makes me liable for your debts. Doesn't it? Evan asked. It makes me the co-signer for this Desert Meridian scheme. Dad wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Son, you are reading it wrong. It is asset protection. No, Evan said. Stella read it, and I trust Stella. He turned back to Tessa. Tessa, he said, and tears began to spill down his cheeks. Is your real name Teresa Vance? The room gasped. Mrs. Miller looked confused. Teresa? Who is Teresa? Teresa Vance, Evan repeated, reading from the sheet. Formerly of Tampa, Florida, sued for $12,000 in unpaid hotel bills. Wanted for questioning regarding check fraud. Tessa's face changed. It was a transformation so sudden it was almost physical. The soft, doe-eyed expression vanished. The lips that had been curved into a shy smile thinned into a hard line. Her posture straightened. She stopped looking at Evan and looked at me, and there was no fear in her eyes anymore. Only pure, unadulterated hate. You bitch, Tessa hissed. Mrs. Miller put a hand to her mouth. Tessa. Shut up, Mom, Tessa snapped. Not looking at her, she kept her eyes locked on me. You think you are so smart, don't you? The little auditor. The one with the calculator? She laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. So what Tessa said, gesturing to the papers. So I changed my name. I wanted a fresh start. Is that a crime? And yeah, Gordon helped us out. He is a businessman. He knows how the world works, unlike you, sitting in your little cubicle counting other people's pennies. It is a crime when you lie on legal documents, I said calmly, and it is a crime when you conspire to defraud investors. Tessa turned to Evan. She grabbed his arm, hard. Evan, grow up, she said. Your dad is trying to build you a future. Your sister is trying to keep you a child. Who paid for the trip? Who cares? We are going to Dubai tomorrow. We are going to be in a 5-star hotel. We are going to live like kings. Are you really going to throw that away because of some paperwork? She was gambling that his desire for the lifestyle was stronger than his morality. Evan looked at her hand on his arm. He looked at her parents, who were staring at their daughter as if she were a stranger. He looked at Dad, who was panting, red-faced, at the end of the table. Evan pulled his arm away. I am not going. Evan said. What? Tessa screeched. I am not going. Evan repeated, louder. I am not getting on that plane. I am not signing any more papers. And I am not marrying Teresa Vance. Dad stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward with a crash. That is enough, Dad roared. This meeting is over. Everyone out, Stella. Get out of my house. You have poisoned them all. He looked at the Millers. I apologize. My daughter is mentally unstable. We will sort this out in the morning. The car picks us up at 8. He was in denial. He thought he could still force reality to bend to his will. He thought if he shouted loud enough, the evidence would disappear. I closed my briefcase. I clicked the latches shut. Click, click. The sound was final. You can shout all you want, Gordon, I said, but you are missing the most important point. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the knob. I turned back to look at them. The scene was a tableau of ruin. Aunt Valerie was crying silently. Uncle Mike was photographing the documents with his phone. The Millers were standing apart from their daughter. Tessa was staring at the wall, her face a mask of fury. Dad was shaking, clutching the edge of the table. "You keep talking about the car picking you up at 8, I said. "You keep talking about the flight." I pulled a small slip of paper from my pocket. It was the sticky note with the case number 4990 Alpha. I read, "What is that?" Dad asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That is the fraud dispute reference number I filed with the bank 3 hours ago." I said, "Regarding the $4,200 you stole for the name change." I opened the door, letting the cool night air rush into the stifling room. "When a charge is flagged for fraud involving a forged signature," I said, "the bank automatically freezes the transaction, and the merchant in this case, Prestige Travel, automatically voids the tickets to prevent loss." I looked Dad in the eye. "There is no car coming at 8, Dad. There are no tickets. The reservation has been deleted. The hotel has been canceled." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Check your email," I said, "and see if the flight still exists." I walked out into the night. Behind me, I heard the sound of a phone falling to the floor, followed by the first real scream of the evening. It wasn't Tessa. It was my father. The audit was complete. The dawn did not bring sunlight to the Stewart household. It brought a notification. At exactly 6:01 in the morning, the collective phones of the Stewart family and the Miller family lit up with a synchronized buzz. It was an automated message from the travel management app, the digital nervous system of the trip, that was supposed to launch their dynasty. Alert reservation reference, 472 Bravo 9 status, changed to suspended, reason payment verification, failure, fraud investigation, pending, please contact your card issuer immediately. I was awake when it happened. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee, watching the sunrise over Charlotte. I did not feel triumph. I felt the cold, clinical satisfaction of a mathematician who has finally balanced a complex equation. The numbers had resolved to 0. My phone began to ring at 6:02. It was my father. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I put it on speaker and set it on the counter. "Stella." He did not sound like the man who had banished me from his house the night before. He sounded like a man drowning. "Stella, you have to undo it. Please, we are supposed to leave for the airport in 2 hours. The cars are ordered. The Millers are packed. I cannot undo a bank protocol." "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I told you last night, once the fraud algorithm is triggered, it is out of my hands. It is a federal compliance issue now. Just call them," he begged. His voice cracked. "Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I had permission. I will pay you the $4,000. I will transfer it right now. Just lift the hold. You do not have $4,000. "Dad," I said, "we both know that. I can get it," he cried. "I can fix this. But you have to open the line. The hotel just emailed me. They canceled the suites because the guarantee card was declined. They are asking for a new payment method for the full $40,000 immediately, or they release the rooms. Then give them your card." I said. There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, suffocating silence. He could not give them his card. His cards were maxed out. His liquidity was gone. The only reason this trip existed was because he was surfing on my credit score and his siblings' savings. "I can't," he whispered. "Stella, please. This is not just a vacation. If we don't go, if I don't meet the partners at Desert Meridian, everything falls apart. It fell apart the moment you cut my signature." I said, "I am not doing this to punish you. Dad, I am doing this because I refuse to be an accessory to a crime. You are on your own." I hung up. I finished my coffee. Then I drove back to the house. I did not go to save them. I went to ensure the wreckage was properly documented. When I arrived, the scene was chaotic. The front door was open. Suitcases were piled in the hallway. Useless monuments to a journey that would never happen. In the living room, the tribunal had reconvened, but the dynamic had shifted tectonically. Dad was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. Mom was weeping silently next to him. Aunt Valerie and Uncle Mike were standing over them, their faces hard as granite. The Millers were standing near the window, whispering furiously to each other, and in the center of the room stood Evan and Tessa. Tessa was pacing. She was still wearing the expensive travel outfit she had picked out, but her face was twisted in a snarl. "This is insane." Tessa spat, gesturing at Dad. "You told us everything was handled. You told my parents this was a company expense. Now the hotel is calling my dad asking for a credit card number, Mrs. Miller stepped forward. Her voice was icy. "We were under the impression that the Stewart family was solvent. Gordon, you told us this merger with Desert Meridian was a done deal. You told us Evan was coming into a trust fund. There is no trust fund," I said from the doorway. Everyone turned to look at me. I walked into the room. I did not carry a weapon. I carried a file folder. "There is only debt," I continued, walking to the center of the room, "and a scheme to cover that debt by liquidating the savings of his brothers and sisters." I looked at the Millers. "Your daughter knew." I said, "She signed the liability agreement. She knew the money for her dress came from my aunt's retirement account." "That is a lie," Tessa screamed. She lunged toward me, but Evan stepped in front of her. He didn't block her to protect her. He blocked her to stop her. Evan looked at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with sleeplessness, but they were clear. "Let me see the papers." "Stella," Evan said, "I showed you yesterday." I reminded him. "No," Evan said, "I want to see her papers." He turned to Tessa. He held out his hand. "Give me your wallet," Evan said. "What?" Tessa recoiled. "Evan, are you crazy? Your sister is brainwashing you." "If your name is Tessa Miller," Evan said, his voice rising, "then show me your driver's license. Show me one credit card with that name on it. Just one." Tessa froze. She looked at her parents. Mr. Miller looked away. He had seen the docket I brought last night. He had made his own calls this morning. He knew. "I don't have to prove anything to you." Tessa sneered. "After everything I have done for you, I tried to give you a backbone. Evan, I tried to get you away from this toxic, controlling family. You tried to get me to sign a guarantee for a shell company." Evan said, "You tried to sell me." He took a step closer to her. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. "Or was I just the easiest mark you ever found?" Tessa looked at him. She looked at the suitcases. She looked at the ruined vacation. She realized the game was over. There was no trip to Dubai. There was no shopping spree. There was no more money to bleed from the Stewart stone. Her face relaxed. The anger vanished, replaced by a cold, bored indifference. "You were sweet, Evan," she said, shrugging. "But you are right. You are weak. You would have been boring to be married to anyway." She turned to her parents. "Daddy, get the car. This place is a dump." Mrs. Miller looked at Mom and Dad with pure disgust. "We will be contacting our lawyer regarding the deposits we put down for the wedding." "Get in line," Uncle Mike rumbled. "We have a few questions about our investment fund first." Tessa grabbed her purse. She walked past me without looking at me. She walked out the door, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood, stepping over the luggage she would never use. Her parents followed her. The slam of the front door echoed like a gunshot. The room was silent. Dad finally looked up. He looked old. He looked broken. It was for the family. He whispered, "I was going to make it back." The deal in Dubai, the partners, they were going to double the capital. There were no partners. "Dad," I said. I opened the file folder I had brought. I pulled out a single email chain I had recovered late last night. It was from the Desert Meridian Gmail account. It was addressed to Dad. Subject: Asset Transfer Protocol. I read it aloud. Upon arrival in Dubai, the signatories Gordon Stewart and Evan Stewart will execute the transfer of all familial holdings to the DMC custodial account. This includes the outstanding balances of the contributors, Valerie Stewart, Michael Stewart, which will be converted to non-voting equity. I lowered the paper. "You weren't going to pay them back," I said. "You were going to use the distraction of the trip to trick them into signing away their rights to their own money. You were going to convert their debt into worthless stock in a fake company." I looked at him. "And you kicked me off the trip because I am the only one who reads the fine print. I was the obstacle." Aunt Valerie let out a sob. She collapsed into a chair. Uncle Mike walked over to Dad. He didn't hit him. He just looked at him with a profound, shattering disappointment. "You are done, Gordon," Uncle Mike said. You are not managing a cent of our money anymore. I want the records. I want everything." Dad looked at me. "Stella, what have you done?" "I saved them," I said. "And I stopped you from committing international wire fraud. You should be thanking me. If you had signed those papers in Dubai, you wouldn't be sitting on your sofa right now. You would be in a foreign prison." I placed the file on the coffee table. "This contains the full audit," I said, to the room, the bank transfers, the forgery proofs, the shell company registration. "I have made copies for Uncle Mike and Aunt Valerie." I looked at Evan. He was standing alone in the middle of the room, staring at the door where Tessa had exited. "Evan," I said. He turned to me. "I am sorry," he said. His voice was thick with tears. "I am so sorry. Stella, I should have listened. I should have protected you. Don't apologize for being manipulated," I said gently. "She was a professional. But this time, don't just say sorry." I walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "Learn to read the small print." "Evan," I said, "that is how you protect yourself. That is how you protect the people you love." I turned to leave. I had nothing left to do here. The truth was out. The infection had been exposed. It would be painful. There would be lawsuits. There would be bankruptcy. The Stewart family brand was bankrupt, but it was clean. I walked out to my car. The morning sun was fully up now, bright and blinding. I sat in the driver's seat and rolled down the window. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw my father through the window, a small, diminished figure arguing with his brother. I saw my mother weeping. I started the engine. I was $30,000 poorer than I was 4 months ago. I had no family vacation. I had no parents I could trust. But as I drove away, leaving the chaos in my rearview mirror, I felt a lightness in my chest I had never felt before. I stood alone in my own kitchen an hour later, listening to the hum of my refrigerator. The silence was not empty. It was full. It was heavy with peace. I realized then that the $30,000 hadn't just paid for a canceled trip. It was the severance package I had paid to quit a job I never wanted. Being the capable one was no longer my burden. I was just Stella. And for the first time in my life, my itinerary was entirely my own. I had been removed from the manifest, and it was the best destination I could have ever reached. Freedom. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving to work, cooking dinner, or maybe relaxing before bed? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and I would love to connect with you. If you enjoyed Stella's journey of justice, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next video.